Hello, this will be a quick video tutorial on the bouncing ball assignment. We're going to use the classic tween to automate our in-between frames. And we're going to try to bring to bear easing or slow in and out, which means that something, when it starts at a halt and goes into motion, it will gradually accelerate. And stretch and squash, which means that something in motion will stretch in the direction of its motion, and then when it hits an obstruction, it will squash. And both of those things will help to add a completeness to our bouncing ball. I'm going to start off by making a ball here. And I'm also going to do another thing that will make things a little bit easier for myself to see the in-between frames and to kind of get a sense of the slow in and out. I'm going to reduce my frame rate to 12 frames per second. It started off with 30 when I made my new project. So I'm going to take the ball, select it, and I can create classic tween either here, or I should be able to do it here too. Okay, so either way is good. It gives me a second. Oh, first it says that you have to turn it into a symbol in order for the in-between to work, and I'm going to be okay with that. I can always break it apart again if I wanted to. If I wanted to break it, I could just right-click on it and break apart. It's back to my basic drawing components now. See? Okay, but I'm not going to break it. So it gives me 1 second, and I can just create a new keyframe or change the position wherever I want just by going to a different place on the timeline and dragging, which I could also do by clicking on a frame and saying convert to keyframe or insert keyframe. And now I have an automated motion from there to there, and if I want it to bounce one time in 1 second, I can just set the top place of the bounce somewhere in the middle there, and now I have a bounce. But it doesn't look like a very natural bounce. It's like this, very sharp angle, and that's not how things would bounce in real life. It's going to be more of an arced path. I turned on the onion skins just to see how things, how the entire path relates, how it all looks. And so I can go in and I can try to go to some earlier position and try to get more of a natural arc to my bounce. And if I move the ball in one position, the other in-between frames are redrawn to accommodate that. And so if I have just 1 second to work with and I have only 12 frames per second, I think it's a little more manageable. I can just go frame by frame and really get a sense of where to go next. And I'm using the keyboard, I'm using the comma to go back a frame and the arrow to go forward. These are also the caret brackets, which is maybe a more comprehensible way, but on the keyboard it's nice to be able to just quickly go forward and back frame to frame. So you see here I have a nice little arc. Now slow in and out or easing will suggest that when it begins the bounce, it's going to be moving at a high velocity. When it hits the ground kind of knocks it up at the same velocity as as its last bounce, but then at some point gravity will begin to take over and it'll go slower and slower and slower and stop, and then begin to accelerate in the other direction, going back down. And then it'll accelerate more and more and more until it hits the ground again. So the slow in and out will means that near the top of the bounce, it's going to be closer together. Closer together between two frames means it's going slower. So we'll just try to, when you look at the onion skin version of this, it'll seem like they're overlapping. Now as it goes, as it's bouncing up at the beginning, it's going to be going a little faster. Well, you might have to really accentuate that. Can you see it slowing down? Maybe not. You can really accentuate that by moving things even closer together up here. And then let's see if that looks better. See it kind of hanging and then beginning to accelerate again. The more you work with that easing, the more visible that that kind of palpable deceleration and acceleration will be. So the other thing you want to add is stretch and squash. I'm doing a screen recording just for people later on. So stretch and squash will mean that whenever it's going its fastest, it will be stretched in the direction of motion the most. And then when it's going slower, it'll kind of pop back into its normal shape. Now when it collides with something, it's going to really squash. And you all have seen this. in your cartoon experiences and maybe in your real life experiences. But right here is when it's hitting the ground, so it's going to be squashed. And you just want to be careful. You squash it with a free transform tool, and the classic tween can actually automate transformations as effectively as changes in position. So squash, and I like to do this from the beginning of the animation to the end. If you go backwards, it can get a little confused for some reason. So here it's squashed, and I go to my next frame, and I'm going to actually rotate it. Well, I'm going to stretch it out a little bit and rotate it a little bit. So it's actually stretching in that direction of the arc. And you'll just have to go frame by frame. It's not really saving you as much work as you might have hoped, automating things, but it's still worth this nuance. And it's going to slowly go back into shape. Maybe even by now, it'll be more or less back into shape. And you want to make sure that in stretching or squashing, you try to maintain a feeling of the mass stays the same, so it doesn't feel like it's getting bigger and smaller. The concreteness of the object will, the credibility of the object will be stronger if you kind of keep the mass the same. Even though it's squashed, it's flatter but it's wider, or it's longer but it's narrower. And so it pops back into shape. The sooner it reattains its original shape, the more solid the object feels. The more wiggly, the more it stretches and squashes, the more like flexible or like gelatinous it will feel. So you can already see that taking hold. And then by the end here, it's going to smash again. Okay. And the drama, the real contrast between the final stretch position and that squash is going to have a real powerful effect on how palpable or like plastic the object feels in terms of like its ability to really deform. Don't be afraid of having a really high degree of contrast between the final stretch position and then that squash. That's actually going to really help add credibility to the motion. And how much it deforms, how quickly it reattains its original shape, how much it accelerates, how quickly, and how much it loses or retains the arc of its bounce from bounce to bounce are going to have a lot to say about the material, the weight, and just like the character of the ball that you're animating in this homework assignment. So now we want to do another bounce. Just add another second, or add, make it however long you want. Insert a keyframe, and go do the same thing. Maybe this time though, the bounce is only this high, and you'll have to go through the same process. But that's the name of the game.